and get free vouchers.
Welcome to News 9. You are watching On Point with me. In today's edition, we have two On Points. One Nation, One Election Bill introduced in Lok Sabha and sent to JPC for further deliberation.
इसके पक्ष में हाँ कहें, जो सदस्य विरोध में ना कहें।
Priyanka Gandhi makes political noise with her bags. First Palestine, now Bangladesh. But before that, headlines. NTA to focus on entrance exams for higher education institutions, not recruitment exams, says Dharmendra Pradhan. Ajit Doval in Beijing to attend India-China Special Representatives talks to restore ties after Ladakh standoff. AQI in Delhi NCR breaches 400 mark, enters severe category. Grab 4 curbs remain in Delhi NCR as pollution peaks. Ukraine claims blast in Moscow that killed Russian military chemical weapons chief. Bengaluru police bust drug racket, seizes banned MDMA crystals worth 24 crore, foreigner held. National Intelligence Agency's report says Khalistani terrorists are planning to target police stations in Punjab. Indian security forces seize Starlink device in Manipur. Amid sub-zero chill in Jammu and Kashmir and Himachal, IMD sounds alarm for intense cold wave through the week. And Justin Trudeau's ally Jagmeet Singh calls for his resignation following the resignation of Deputy Prime Minister. The 129th Constitution Amendment Bill, known as One Nation, One Election, seeks to implement simultaneous election for the Lok Sabha and the state assemblies. It was introduced in the lower house on Tuesday by Law Minister Arjun Meghwal, and after its introduction, it was referred to the Joint Parliamentary Committee for a review. The bill was introduced in the House through division after the opposition insisted that it has to go for vote. 269 members voted for it. 198 members opposed it. Most opposition leaders asserted that the bill went against the basic structure of the constitution. The BJP will get to chair the JPC and hold a majority of seats. The committee's initial term is for 90 days and extendable if needed. Now, let's look at the fine print. The fine print is implementation timeline set for 2034. So it's nothing now. Requires significant constitutional amendment. Amendments to include municipalities and panchayats. Fourth, creation of a unified voter roll, which many people say is much required. Requires a 2/3 majority in both houses. Sixth, bill sent to the JPC for further scrutiny. Seventh, Kovind panel drafted the bill. Eighth, Midterm polls will fill the unexpired terms if a government collapses early. 9th phase 1. Simultaneous Lok Sabha and State Assembly polls. 10th phase 2. Municipal and Panchayat polls within 100 days of phase 1. Now, before we go any further into the for and against, there was a lot of verbal duel which the House witnessed. Let me play those reactions for you.
कि इसको जेपीसी को दे देना चाहिए। जब ये संविधान सुधार का विधेयक, संवैधानिक संशोधन जब कैबिनेट में चर्चा में आया, तब प्रधानमंत्री जी ने स्वयं मंशा व्यक्त करी थी कि इसको जेपीसी को देना चाहिए। इस पर विस्तृत चर्चा सभी स्तर पर होनी चाहिए। इसलिए मुझे लगता है कि इसमें सदन का ज्यादा समय जाया करे बगैर, अगर मंत्री जी कहते हैं कि इसको जेपीसी को सौंपने के लिए वो तैयार है, तो जेपीसी में सारी चर्चा होगी और जब जेपीसी के रिपोर्ट के आधार पर कैबिनेट इसको पारित करेगी, तब भी फिर से चर्चा होनी है।
I rise to oppose the introduction of the Constitution 129th Amendment Bill 2024 and the Union Territories Laws Amendment Bill 2024. Mr. Speaker, sir, beyond the 7th schedule of the Constitution is the basic structure doctrine. And that basic structure doctrine spells out that there are certain features of the Indian Constitution which are beyond the amending power of this House also. One of the essential features is federalism and the structure of our democracy. And therefore, the bills which have been moved by the Honorable Minister of Law and Justice absolutely assault the basic structure of the Constitution and are beyond the legislative competence of this House, and therefore they need to be opposed ab initio, and the introduction of those bills have to be stopped.
आपने शुरू में हाउस का सेंस लेकर के बहुत ही क्लियर शब्दों में आपने कहा कि पहले उसका उदाहरण भी आपने दिया और दो बिल्स को एक साथ क्लब करके चर्चा का समय एक साथ करेंगे, लेकिन उसका प्रेजेंटेशन अलग होगा। साथ साथ में ये भी कहा क्योंकि नोटिस एक पार्टी से कई नोटिस आए हैं, किसी पार्टी से नहीं आया, लेकिन विषय गंभीर है, इसीलिए अध्यक्ष ने कहा कि सारे पॉलिटिकल पार्टी लीडर्स को, सारे अध्यक्ष जी ने ऑलरेडी कहा सारे पॉलिटिकल पार्टी का लीडर्स को, फ्लोर लीडर्स को इसमें मत रखने का मौका देंगे, ये अध्यक्ष ने कहा है। और ऑल द फ्लोर लीडर्स मतलब सब पॉलिटिकल पार्टी, आप सिर्फ इस संसद को रिप्रेजेंट नहीं करते हैं, हर एक पॉलिटिकल पार्टी का रिप्रेजेंटेटिव है इसमें, सबको बोलने का मौका मिलना चाहिए।
The basic structure of Constitution is read in between the lines. This proposed bill hits the basic structure of the Constitution itself. And if any bill, any act which hits the basic structure of the Constitution, that is ultra-virus. And it is ultra-virus. Sir, proposed Article 83, Sub-Article 5 is just contrary to Article 83, Sub-Article 2. Just contrary. Either you keep 83.2 or you keep 83.5. Both cannot be kept. Both are inconsistent with each other. Then, sir, effect of proposed Article 82A, Sub-Article 3 simply establishes that tenure of state legislative assembly simply depending upon the tenure of the House of the People. It is not a doctrine of pleasure. Doctrine of pleasure is under Article 311 of the Constitution. But a mandate which has been given by the people of the country that state assemblies tenure will be depending upon the doctrine of pleasure of this house. How it can be? This is inconsistent. It cannot be accepted.
Now let's take a look at the arguments in favor of the nation, one election, and arguments against it. So arguments that are in favor of one nation, one election are: it will not tinker with the basic principle of the Constitution. Second, financially efficient and mitigates resource diversion. Third, can boost voter turnout. Fourth, prevents policy paralysis. Fifth, simplify voting processes. Sixth, increase focus on governance. Seventh, streamlines the poll process. Eighth, preserves regional party relevance. Ninth, enhances political opportunities. Now there are arguments against it. And the arguments are anti-federal, assault on the constitutional structure, attack on the voting rights of the citizen, gives unconstitutional power to the EC, gives more power to the president to dismiss state governments, violates democratic self-governance, threat to regional parties, not right to mix the tenure of center and state governments, and violates fundamental law, paves way for dictatorship. My big questions are: will one nation, one poll help reduce expenditure or be detrimental to the federal politics? My second question is, will national narratives outweigh regional narratives? My third question is, will it help the economy boom or be detrimental to it? And my fourth question is, will ONOP help governance or lead to unchecked power? And my fifth question is, will the matter end up in the court? Because there are a lot of political parties saying that the legislative power of the assemblies cannot be ignored. And sixth, will the bill end up uniting the country or divide it further? Now let me introduce my guests. I'm joined by Advocate Sulaiman Mohammad Khan, spokesperson Congress Party. I'm joined by Jasmine Sandhawalia, spokesperson Bharatiya Janata Party. I'm joined by Savio Rodriguez, founder and editor-in-chief, Goa Chronicle. Thank you all of you for joining me. One by one, straight question. Madam, question to you. Should the government have gone for the ONP or should they have focused more on killing black money in elections?
Mr. Karthike, I want to begin my debate by saying that you just don't oppose it because you have to oppose it. When one nation, one election is an idea which is not new to our country. After independence in 1947, India from 1951 to 67 had simultaneous elections of the parliament and 22 states. It was a system which was already in existence, and at that time, in all those years, Congress was ruling this nation. This is an historic fact which the Congress cannot write away. Today, to say that this is a wrong bill which is being introduced, they have a right to disagree. They are in the opposition. I, as a BJP spokesperson, will defend it, that it will not only curtail expenditure, but it will streamline our political parties. There will be less corruption in electioneering. People will have one-time polling. The decision-making of the parliament and the states will be simultaneous. Expenditure will come down. Resources of the government will be utilized only once. And after 75 years, if we are moving towards a betterment and a different change should not just be opposed because the opposition has to oppose it. The benefits of holding elections of 100 crore voters definitely significantly outweighs to the reasons they are touting. They are saying that it is against federal system. Was it against federal system when it was implemented from 1951 to 67 and they did not squeak? They did not raise this issue. Even in 83, I think, the Joint Parliamentary Committee had recommended to Indira Gandhi that, this system should again be implemented. We in the BJP have recommended this for consensus to the JPC committee, which will discuss it. And every reasonable voice, every parliamentarian has a right to debate, but please do not scuttle something which can benefit the nation only because it has been proposed by the BJP. This system was started by our august leaders after independence from 51 to 67. This was practiced. I rest my case on that.
Okay. Suleiman, is it correct to say what your colleague Manish Tiwari said in Parliament, Lok Sabha, it violates the basic structure of the Constitution?
In a way it does. But other than that, the two basic arguments which the government is taking while introducing this bill is that one, it is saving a lot of money or cost or the cost which the government exchequer has to bear, some 4,500 crores. And second point they have raised is that it will improve or benefit the economic growth, GDP growth, lower inflation, etc. Now, both these arguments are baseless, without any research. They have no, evidentiary backing to say this. First of all, 4,500 crores, I think, for a vibrant democracy or for a, democracy in a spirit in which the Constitution says is a small amount, more so when BJP has an electoral bond scam of 8,250 crores. So, and secondly, the new EVMs and VVPATs, which have to be changed every 15 years, will cost exchequer 10,000 crores every 15 years. So, any saving which they say is going to, the money they are going to save, the government is going to save, will be depleted by these 10,000 crores every 15 years. Secondly, about the economic benefit or the lowering down of inflation is based on a non-peer review, which is unpublished, which is co-authored by a BJP member, N.K. Singh. That reasoning is based on that article, which has been not even been published. So it has no backing that it will lower down the economic, it will lower down the cost, and it will help in the economic stability or improvement. So these two arguments were the two major arguments. Thirdly,
but there are multiple arguments. But there are multiple arguments, Suleiman. There are multiple arguments. There's an argument in context of governance. There is argument in context of expenditure. There are arguments in context of time wasted. Savio, my question to you is very simple. When we talk about one nation, one poll, it's being seen from the perspective of governance. But sometimes local electioneering, the state electioneering, also becomes a process in which you can challenge the central politics, which can be very hegemonic. People who live outside Delhi understand the power of this electioneering, which is apart from the central electioneering pattern. So you, who have spent a life outside Delhi also doing things, how do you see that? Because there is also a third aspect to it.
I think the most important thing we need to understand is also from the voters' point of view. While we are talking primarily politics, and we are talking about the fact that we need to and rightfully save a lot of money, because if you go by what report the Center for Media Studies brought out in 2019 and 2024, if you see the election expenses that they spoke about, at that point of time, the cost per voter came up to rupees 700 as a cost per voter. And the estimated cost in 2019 was rupees 55,000 crore. This has gone up in 2024, but the same organization that's done the study to rupees 1,400 per voter, bringing that cost up to roughly about 1,35,000 crore. But you see, for us as citizens or any person outside the purview of politics, the need for him to come out and cast his vote over different times, then be a part of the code of conduct that happens. Therefore, work gets stopped, his papers get stopped. So why not look at it from the voter point of view? Why is it not possible for the voter to come out at one point of time and be able to vote for his or her candidate depending on who they choose? In most cases, like you take in Goa, for example, if you look at the way the pattern works, in some cases, people vote for the BJP candidate when it comes to the Lok Sabha elections. And in some cases, they don't vote for the BJP candidate when it comes to the state assembly elections. So people are very, very smart. The voters are smart. We are not. We are trying to think that the voter is not smart, but the voter is smart enough to understand what he wants to choose. Because at the end of the day, no matter what campaigning a political party does, no matter amount of money that the government will spend in ensuring elections
Okay.
happen, it is that voter who decides who comes into power at the center or at the state. So while politics has been played at it, I think the politicians need to look at it from the purview of the voter, number one. Number two, the cost of running an elections, continuous elections, the person who's bearing the cost is actually the voter at the end of the day, because that's the kind of money that comes out of the taxes that the voter pays. So while we are playing politics around it, Congress is opposing it, BJP is putting out its reasons to go ahead with it. I think the real consensus must come from the people. If the people are happy going about saying, okay, this is the way we want to go, and that's what their representatives in parliament are, that this is what we want and this is what we want to do, then I think it's an idea that we need to go with. Mostly because the escalating costs, if you see, it's almost double from 2019 to 2024. If you're going to go back to 2029, that cost is also going to go further higher. Who's burdened by the cost of voting? It is not the politicians, it is not the political parties. The burden is on the people who vote, because the money comes out of our taxes.
I think that's a pretty unique perspective. You're not speaking from the context of politics, you are speaking from the context of the people. I completely accept that point of view, but before we go any further into this discussion, let me play out a bite of the former President Ramnath Kovind on this issue.
कैसा मोटे तौर पर आज जो है विश्व इकोनॉमी के परिप्रेक्ष्य में देश की हमारी इकोनॉमी जो है पिछले 23-24 में 7.2 थी, 7.2 राइजिंग इकोनॉमी में है इंडिया की। 7.2 में यदि आप 1.5 और ऐड कर दें तो आपका कितना होता है 9.7। अब ये 9.7 और जिस दिन हमारी इकोनॉमी 10 और 10.5 और 11 के बीच में पहुंच जाएगी, उस समय हमारा देश जो है वो जो इकोनॉमी की लाइन में जो 3 या 4 देश खड़े होंगे उसमें उस पंक्ति में हमारा देश भी खड़ा हो जाएगा। लेकिन उसके साथ ही साथ हमें अपनी जो सभ्यता है, अपनी सिविलाइजेशन है, हमारी जो संस्कार हैं भारत के, वो सब हमको मेंटेन रखने हैं। और मेंटेन रखने वाले कौन हैं? जो सबसे निचले स्तर का व्यक्ति है, जो आर्थिक दृष्टि से कमजोर है, खास करके जो हमारे ट्राइबल्स भाई बहन हैं। इनकी गांव में स्थिति आप देखिए। एक मैं आपको उदाहरण देता हूँ, मैं बहुत पुराना उदाहरण दे रहा हूँ, अभी तो बहुत सारी चीजें बदल गई। लगभग शायद 12-15 साल पहले एक किसी गांव में इलेक्शंस जब हो रहे थे तो मैं गया एक गांव में, ट्राइबल गांव में, कुछ लोग और भी थे। मैंने देखा वहां पर उन्होंने ढोल लगाने के साथ तो स्वागत किया, समझ में आया। सबसे पहले उन्होंने चारपाई पर बिठाला। तो मैंने कहा आप लोग यहाँ हम तो आपसे बात करने आए। नहीं, पहले आप हमारी बात सुनिए। बात क्या थी? चारपाई पर बिठाल करके एक बाल्टी में पानी लाया, लोटे से पैर धोए, कहने हम पैर धोएंगे। जो हमारा मेहमान आता है उसका पैर।
Okay, now let me straight away go to BJP spokesperson. Madam, the question is, why are majority of regional parties opposed to it? Barring those who are in alliance with BJP, majority of them are opposed to it.
Well, this could be a fair causes sometimes that the regional parties might be feeling that they could be scuttled, but like the prior spokesperson said, and he had a very valid point, and that is that all of us, all politicians and all political parties are looking from a politician's prism. They are not looking from a voter's prism, and an Indian voter is very astute and understands and has a very discerning eye. You see, in parliament elections, BJP does very well in most states. But when it comes to assembly elections, we have lost in many states because the people in the states chose the regional parties because they felt that the regional parties were more proactive in protecting their rights. So whatever the perception was, so it is not. And also, I think the opposition parties need to understand that there is, when the voter is going to go and poll in, he is going to vote for the parliament and the assembly, and he or she has the ability to discern who or she is going to vote for. And I think it's the boogie, which is the insecurity which is being built, and sometimes a hype is created that this is wrong. It was a very good practice till 67. It was constructive for the nation. We were a new nation, and it will definitely curtail down the expenses. And also remember that the teaching staff, which is throughout the time, 5 years, is involved in parliament elections, in assembly elections, in panchayat elections, in municipal elections, will only have to do it once. So the advantages outweigh way more substantially than the cons that the opposition is touting. And India is ready at the moment. We are a thriving economy. We are aiming to be the third largest economy in 2027. And I feel that and substantial growth of 1.5% in our GDP is a huge, it's a humongous growth for us, and we should look forward to it.
Mohammed, what is the basic fear in mind of the opposition? In politics, fear is an important component for any action. What is opposition fearing in context of one nation, one poll, if I may ask you?
Karthik, there is no fear. But when a bill is being brought in the parliament or in the assembly, any bill which is placed before the house, you have to justify the reasons for placing the bill. They're saying saving money, etc. It's all baseless. Your previous panelist, Mr. Savio, if I remember, he was a BJP spokesperson some time ago. Now he's appearing as a journalist or a columnist. But I have no objection. But he was opposing, saying the cost is saving, etc. It's not. There is no research on that. Nothing. And if
Sulaiman, my question, you can say, my question to you was, why are you opposed to it? No, let's not make it about Savio. He can be in whatever avatar he wants to be. I'm just asking you, you're the spokesperson of the party, why are you opposed to it? That's it. Simple question. आप इसके खिलाफ क्यों हैं? बस मैं इतना जानना चाहता हूँ.
It is against the federal structure of the country. Secondly, the reasons which are being given in the bill, that it saves money, it is booming the economy, etc., are completely baseless. It's just because there's one benefit that the Prime Minister, who's otherwise in an election mode all the time, will have, if he has to be, that mode will be stopped. That is only benefit. Otherwise, there is no benefit of it. Nothing.
I'll give you an example. Your own leader, for example, when BJP attacked your leaders, your own leader said that the first, second, third amendments which were done by the Congress party were for a cause. When BJP was saying right to speech was amended by Jawaharlal Nehru, it was amended because Jawaharlal Nehru felt that the communal speech was getting better of reasonable speech. Or for example, when the courts were restrained, it was done because the abolition of the Zamindari Act was being challenged in the court. Constitution is amended in context of the political vision of the government of the day. It has been happening from the 1952, and that's the accepted part. So my question, since you are well versed in law, my question to you, sir, is what is the basic objection to it? Is it governance? Is it anti-federal? Is it democracy? Or do you feel that the people can't make a choice in the sense that, people will get overwhelmed by the national narrative? Or you feel that the voters will not be able to make a difference between center, state and local election? What is that basic thing? That I want to understand from you.
No,
because BJP is saying governance. I personally disagree. I want to understand why do you disagree?
No, first of all, the amendments which you talked about, 50s, there are different times, the circumstances are complex, the circumstances are different, then only these amendments are being brought. But right now, what is the basis for the government to bring this bill? I say it is against federalism. I say the reasons which have been given by the government are not substantiated by any evidence. Now about, your influence, saying that the national party will influence the voters, etc. I think it is one of the factor that the party which will be in the center right now, the BJP, it will be Congress tomorrow. So it's either way. So the party at the center will have a dominant, opposition as well. This is one of the reasons if we see it practically. So there are several reasons. One is it's against the federal structure. Secondly, the money thing is completely baseless. Thirdly, and yes, when you do a midterm election as per this bill, after the midterm election, the tenure of that assembly or the parliament will not be full 5 years term, 5 years term. For the reason it will be the original term which is left. So we will have 3 elections in 5 years, not 2 otherwise. What is happening at present? So all the arguments which the government has placed before the houses and before the people are completely, without
Savio, do you think that this whole exercise, politically speaking, might end up in the Supreme Court, in front of a larger bench? Where do you expect this to go? Because my understanding is that JPC will have its view, but this is also going to get challenged in the court. I don't think it's going to have an easy run.
No, I don't think it's going to have an easy run either, Karthikeyan. What I think at the end of the day, like I said, there are political parties that have their opinions for supporting it and political parties that have their own opinions for opposing it. What I look at it primarily is from how does the voter look at the exercise of voting. I come back to the most important thing, having myself contested an election in 2022. I can tell you that the acquisition of a voter itself is an exercise. The acquisition of a voter from a government point of view to get voters registered itself is an exercise. Number one. Number two, for a candidate or a political party to go into acquisition of voters again is an exercise. And the voter himself is fed up and tired of continuously going. You have to go and vote for the Lok Sabha. You have to go for the assembly elections. You have to go for the panchayat elections. You have to go for, at times, within your own sabhas for that election. Beyond the point of time, all the voter wants is to move on. He wants to see progress. He is wise enough to decide. So while I believe it will go the whole route of the discussions that happen in Parliament, I also believe, like you, Karthikeyan, that it will end up in Supreme Court, and people at that time, or the court at that point of time, in its wisdom, will take the decision it requires. They are looking at an implementation of 2034. So we've got a whole 10 years to put this in process to correct all the lacunae that are going to come. Like the question that was raised by the Congress spokesperson.
Savio,
Savio,
what I feel? Savio, what I feel? I'm falling short of time. I had interviewed T.S. Krishnamurthy also. What I feel, for me, what is the big picture? I think the big picture is that Bharatiya Janata Party in its third term is pushing for certain transformative legislation despite numbers not with them. It includes one nation, one poll, and I feel that similar legislations will find themselves being tabled on the floor of the House in Lok Sabha in future. That's going to happen. But thank you all of you for joining this debate. But my conversation does not end, because I interviewed the former election commissioner, Mr. Krishnamurthy, who had a very different take on this issue of one nation, one election. Welcome, Mr. Krishnamurthy, and let me begin this conversation by asking you, is one nation, one poll necessary?
My answer will be, it's desirable. Whether it is necessary is a moot point, because there are many issues involved in it, whether the political parties will accept it, whether constitutionally it is possible to introduce it. But from the point of view of administration, it is indeed desirable, because you not only save time, energy, and also cutting down expenditure. So as an administrative measure, it is certainly a welcome proposal.
Sir, we have not resolved the issue of black money in polls, which is a real problem. So can ONOP deal with that issue? Because that's the elephant in the room, sir.
Certainly not. Actually, as far as the election expenditure is concerned, I don't think it has any relationship with one nation, one poll, except saying that instead of incurring expenditure twice for elections, you are trying to cut down the expenditure. But as far as black money role is concerned, there is no doubt that a lot of money is spent on Indian elections, which are legally may not be justifiable, but then there are enough loopholes for the money to be spent, and the funds are also, the source of funds is also questionable, because we have an objectionable nexus between the corporates and the political parties. So it does certainly taints the policy making of the party in power. So it is a different thing as far as the black money impact on the elections. But on the expenditure side, yes, there is certainly a improvement if it is combined and held together.
Sir, election in India is also about economy. So my question to you is that ONOP is looked from the governance perspective, but what about from the expenditure perspective that elections create that end up lifting the economy, which creates a demand for services?
As far as expenditure on the consumption or expenditure on the various electoral campaigns, etc., well, it has its own benefit to the economy, no doubt about it. But then, are you looking at it from the angle of undesirable expenditure, or are you looking at, because if you can save some expenditure from the conduct of the elections, both from the government as well as from the political party side, to that extent those savings could be used for more productive purposes. I'm not saying that election is not a productive expenditure. It is indeed. It has its own benefits. But more productive expenditure, the money could have been used for more productive expenditure than spending for the elections twice over, for the state election as well as parliament elections.
Do you think that can stand the test of the constitution? A lot of parliamentarians were arguing that it is going against the basic structure of the constitution. Can you just take us through this nuance?
Yeah, in fact, this is one important issue on which I have my own apprehensions. The high-level committee has recommended that the majority resolution in the parliament is good enough for bringing about. I am sure the political parties will not be accepting it, and they will be challenging it. It will go to the courts. So it is bound to be challenged in the courts. But if I'm not an expert on the Constitution, though I'm a law degree holder, but I cannot say that I have an authority to speak on the Constitution. If the recommendation of the high-level committee is accepted or is justified in the courts, then there should be no difficulty. But I am sure that the states will crave for their own participation in the amendment, and they will have their own arguments for this purpose. So it is quite likely that this will be a very serious obstacle to implementing this particular project.
So are you saying that this particular issue in which the states would like to have a say will be one of the roadblocks in front of the government?
Quite likely. This is one of the things I do anticipate. But again, there is another point on the local self-government election. They have said a second, that for that purpose they may go to the states for the consent. And I'm not sure whether the state governments will be able to approve of this, particularly because the elections have to be held within 100 days. There can be practical difficulties in holding elections within 100 days. So there are practical issues, but administratively and on financial grounds only, I would say it is not a proposal which needs to be rejected.
So when you talk about these nitty-gritties, I would say that the God lies in detail, and that is why the bill needs to be examined. A lot of people have argued against this, that politics has to be seen from the context of democracy. It just cannot be seen from the context of governance. The democratic activity inside legislature is also part and parcel of the larger ecosystem, sir.
I entirely agree with you. In fact, such a measure, it would be ideal if you can have some kind of a political consensus. In fact, I'm writing a book on the state of global democracies. This is one of the points I'm making. See, whenever you have a large country, federal or unitary, it is always better to have a consensus among the political parties. Unfortunately, in India, electoral reforms have received least attention among the political parties. If you browse through the manifestos of most of the political parties, you will find there is no reference to electoral reforms at all. So I would strongly urge a proper consensus to be arrived at least on the broad issues, if not on the nitty-gritty details, at least on the broad issues, so that it doesn't face unnecessary challenges and obstacles.
So let me ask you, if you look at the books written by the former election commissioners, they had their views on the electoral reforms, but I don't think one nation, one election topped the list of the electoral reforms. It was not there, but it has become a point of contest. So what are the 5 big electoral reforms that India requires?
In my opinion, the most important change that India requires is in the system of voting. We have what is known as the first past post system, which results in a person getting a winner, they win this election even with a difference of 1 vote. So this must be changed because, in my opinion, if in a representative democracy, the representative should represent at least, if not 50%, at least 33 and 1/3% of the voters. If this change can be brought about, it may result in a lot of improvement in our electoral system. Unfortunately, the present system allows the small parties to thrive and even sometimes dictate terms in the formation of government, because you can win in a constituency with 20 to 25% of votes polled. This is not a very desirable system. So there are many alternatives like proportional representation or a mixed system and so on. But this, in my opinion, is the most important and urgent reform that India should have, because it will certainly strengthen the unity of this country.
Anything to do with the black money?
I beg your pardon?
What about black money?
Yes, the second reform I would say is about the regulation of expenditure.
Yes.
At the moment, the donations to political parties by corporates have been, the electoral bond scheme was, of course, held unconstitutional. In fact, I had myself said it was not a very transparent system. So my suggestion is to have a national election fund where corporates and individuals can give donations and have 100% tax exemption. That money could be used for conducting the elections, and there can be a consensus arrived at by the election commission with the political parties about the way in which the money has to be distributed. It can be in the form of cash or in the form of kind. There are many suggestions in this regard. So the obnoxious nexus between the corporates and the political parties needs to be snapped. It is indeed a very important reform that is required.
And my last question to you very quickly, sir. All said and done, but Election Commission of India, a lot of people say is like a toothless tiger. People make all sorts of comments and they get away in every election.
Well, this is where again there are differences of opinion. People think that the Election Commission has got enormous powers to conduct the elections. To some extent it is true, but it is not fully true at all. Because in the implementation of Model Code of Conduct, we have tremendous challenges and difficulties in enforcing a peaceful conduct of elections. So in my opinion, some aspects of Model Code of Conduct need to be given a legislative sanction, and the Election Commission should have the power to impose penalties. They cannot imprison anybody, they can impose penalties, they can impose damages to be given, and so on. So there are methods by which the Model Code of Conduct can be better enforced. Absolutely. If it is given at least to some extent legislative sanction.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for speaking with Newsline.
Thank you very much. Thank you.